Join your host, Des Hamilton, to find out exactly how to say goodbye to being poor and hello to being rich.
Welcome back to the Goodbye Poor Hello Rich show with me, Des Hamilton, the guy in the chair, the guy in the kitchen, the guy with a new camera and a fancy mic who's trying to do everything he can remotely, but the weather is letting him down. So here we are once again back in the kitchen. Thank you once again to our sponsors, SellerAmp SaaS, easily hands down the best bit of sourcing analysis software on the market in your Amazon seller journey, with an app and a Chrome extension that just blows everything else out of the water when it comes to data analysis and figuring out what sort of key points of information you need to know about any particular product to make your Amazon selling journey more profitable, more successful, and more cost and time effective. That's what it's all about, isn't it? Thank you for supporting the show. Truly grateful. Right, let's get into this one. This is the big one. This is the Rob Moore show. This is Rob Moore, the disruptor. Rob Moore, the guy who has got a property empire, over 340 units, over 8 figures in his business, 2-time public speaking world record holder, multi-millionaire in his 30s, a social media following in its millions, a network with the types of Nigel Farage, Andrew Tate, Piers Morgan, and all of these other types from that particular side of the political spectrum in his network. This is a big deal. This is a big player. This is one where I would look at and say, that guy's made it. He's interviewing Rob Moore. Yeah, I know. That's how it felt. Let me tell you the story of how this meeting came together, all right? A couple of months ago, I did a podcast and Ask Me Anything thing. And it was around about the time where I quit my job and around about the time where the challenge finished and we were flying. At that time, wallop, we flew up the charts. Flew up the charts. We were something like number 15. And I started looking at the people around me that we were charting with and I thought, well, hello, look, there's Layla Hormozy. There's Simon Squibb. And up we went. 14, 13, 12, 11. Peaked at number 11. And I'm looking around and we're beating Rob Moore. We're beating Simon Squibb. We're beating the rich dad, poor dad guy. We're beating an awful lot of the big players, the BBC. And it was unbelievable. I reached out to Sophie, my social media manager, and said, right, get something going in place, tag everybody and say, look, multi-millionaires, tag them all, put them all in their names. Des is in his kitchen just outside of Brighton without 2 pence to rub together and he's beating you. Why don't you come onto his show and he can tell you where you're going wrong? Right. Naturally, Sophie got back in and said, no, we're not writing that. We'll write this instead, and wrote a far more professional looking bit of kit. But it went out and we had some people that took the bait. We had Ashley Morris on the show a few months back, who runs the podcast about how to help other podcasters. He works for Progressive Media, which is Rob's media firm. So we had a line into Rob there. Simon's team also responded really kindly and we started talking. But Rob was the one that confirmed and we went, right, let's go. And it was a case of, right, what's the situation? I said, well, if Rob Moore's on the show, I'll go up to meet him. He's in Peterborough. No problems at all. I'll drive up. I'll stay overnight if I have to. It's no biggie, you know. I will do whatever it takes to get these sorts of names on the show. So, all right, here we go. And I went up to Peterborough. I took my kit. It was one of the main reasons why I bought this fancy camera and this fancy mic, is because I needed some decent setup for the chat that I had with Rob. They landed on the mat about a day before I went up there. Drove up to Peterborough. Went into the office. 2 Lamborghinis parked in the car park. And we went in and everything got going. For those watching the audio, we are in Rob's studio. Naturally, none of that is mine, but Rob made it very clear, this is your interview, this is your show, we can talk about it. Now, what was really fascinating with all of this is Rob is known, he's a self-confessed motor mouth. He's known for his controversial opinions. You watch him on social media and he's coming out with something usually about the controlling state and how you need to inherit wealth or how to earn wealth in order to escape it. No problems with that. Utterly agree with that. But what he does do is he falls more on the right side of the political spectrum. And that's not a controversial statement to make. That's just a matter of fact. When we talk about Farage and Morgan and Tate, That's where these guys lie. That's utterly fine. But what was really interesting, and we won't show this on the interview, but Rob walks into the room, shakes my hand and says, "Hi, Des, are you ready to bring it?" And I said, "You clearly haven't listened to my show before." I'm not the guy that brings it. Because if you listen to Rob's show, and I recommend you do, it's a great listen. It's called Disruptors. It's usually floating around anywhere between number 5 and number 10 on the charts. Really, really great listen. But what he does do is that he takes on interviews that try to challenge him, because that is where he's comfortable. And they try to challenge him on his friends. Often they bring up Andrew Tate or they bring up Farage and they try and poke holes in him for having associations like this. What? That's nothing to do with me. That's nothing to do with me. I'm going up to meet Rob Moore, the business person. I'm not going up to meet Rob Moore, the friend of X. That's irrelevant. So I said to him, I want to know your story. It's not about the numbers. It's not about the cars. It's not about this massive, massive wealth. It's about how you got there. That's me. That's the way I do it. I want to know more about the human behind the business, because that's what we aspire to be, isn't it? We aspire to be in the circles that Rob's in. The fact is that he's made contacts with these people because he's got that power through his wealth to be able to do that. And that's something to aspire to. So what would it take for people like me, people like you, to get to the position that Rob is at? I think we'll leave it there. We'll get to the interview. Look, I just want to throw in another side, right? I'm going to slow down on my updates on the week and my updates on my opinions in these episodes now. I'm doing a separate YouTube channel where I'll be exploring more of my week to week. For example, it's half term at the moment. I want to talk you through what half term looks like with me running this business with my kids off school. I also want to talk about how I can manage doing the bare minimum. What does the bare minimum look like? I can also talk about what other things I've got coming down the pipeline. I'm aware that I haven't spoken about my Amazon journey for a little while, so I want to talk about that. I'm also aware that I've not actually told you what I do when it comes to TikTok Shop. I want to share that. All of those things are going to be on my regular YouTube, dropping on a Tuesday, Tuesday, that's what we're calling it, as well as this podcast, where what I'll do is I'll just showcase the people that I'm speaking to more, as well as throw my own Ask Me Anything in from time to time. That's the update for the show. Do me a favour, will you roll it? Rob, so lovely to meet you. Thank you so much for allowing me to come up here and meet you.
Pleasure, Des. What do you think of the studio?
I love it.
Yeah.
Hot, but bright lights, right?
Sweaty.
This is showbiz, I guess. Right. Talk us through, because I know everyone's itching to know, it's the 50 grand of debt that got me. When I first looked at everything you were doing, that was the headline. You wiped out 50 grand of debt in a year, didn't you? Talk us through how you went from that position to basically the path that you are on now.
Yeah, so 50 grand of debt 18 years ago.
Yeah.
That's probably 100 grand now if you work out what inflation has been.
Yeah, right.
So let's just call it inflation adjusted 100 grand. So I managed to get myself into that debt, not overnight. I was earning 200 quid a week and probably spending 300 quid a week. And it's like Chinese water torture.
Yeah.
You don't really notice it. And then 3, 5, 10 years down the line, you're like, holy shit, this is now really heavy on me. I was just making regular bad, small money decisions. You know, buying a shirt for a weekend out and spending 150 quid in it, and I only had 100 quid, but doing that regularly. And, you know, I got a car loan because they're like, 200 quid a week, you can get a nice sports car, instead of thinking, well, what's the actual cost of the car? So this is why my personal mission now is to help as many people on this planet get better financial knowledge, because I had terrible financial knowledge. So I amassed 50 grand's worth of debt from uni until age 25, so in 7 years. And I was probably a few weeks away, or one big bill away, from having to go personally bankrupt, right, in reality.
Yeah.
Which most people are now. You know, most people now, they've got, a week's savings on average. They've got 1,500 quid, I think, or less.
Yeah, only more lines of credit options available to them. We never had that 20 years ago.
No. Well, that's another thing. You know, you're not told, don't buy it until you've got enough money. You're told you want it, get a loan for it.
Yeah.
So how I got rid of the debt was I got into property, and first I worked for a property sourcing company, and I blagged a high commission job. So I was prepared to work for free because I was doing my art and eBay reselling before it was a thing nearly 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was, I knew I could just about keep myself afloat with that, because most of it was going in interest. So I thought, well, I'll work for free and then let's see what they'll pay me per deal, even though I'd never done any sales before. But I thought, well, I'll learn this. So I blagged a deal of £8 an hour, but 500 quid commission for every deal.
Nice.
And that really motivated me. And so I knew the quicker I could learn to sell, the quicker these 500s are going to come in.
Yeah.
And by the way, sometimes we'd source a development with 40 apartments in it. So if I could sell 5 to one person, that was £2,500 to me. So I literally was listening to CDs back then in the car and, in the gym and way into the evenings to learn how to sell. And then I was putting into practice what I was learning by selling these deals. And so that wiped out quite a lot of my debt. Then, kind of evenings and weekends, I was buying property with my business partner. But he was funding it because he had all the money. I didn't have any of the money, so he was funding it. And then what we started to do was source deals ourselves. And so instead of getting 500 quid commission, I could make £5,000 because didn't work for the guy anymore.
Yeah.
I worked for myself. Then in that same year, I learned to do public speaking, and I think I got paid like £3,500 for my first speech.
Ooh.
And then now I get paid about 30. My last speech I got paid 32 grand for, for one keynote speech. Obviously it's different now. So it's a combination of taking a really low basic, but a really high commission, then learning how to speak so I could get paid for speaking, then buying and selling deals myself, and then us becoming the deal sourcer.
Yeah.
And so I wiped out the 50 grand within that year. Oh, I did refinance a house I had. So I had one house that I lived in and I remortgaged it.
Right.
And I can't remember what, it was in the low tens of thousands. It wasn't in the hundreds of thousands. So that helped.
Yeah.
And that was obviously a much better use of the money. And I wiped out the debt. And I didn't quite earn a 6-figure in that year, but it wasn't far off. And I actually bought a car outright, a Nissan 350Z. So this was 2006.
Never forget the first car, do you? Never.
Well, actually, the Mazda 323 Sport was the first sports car I got, but that was on a £200 a month finance deal.
Right.
And here's the thing: I bought that car for 10, sold it for 3.5, sold it three and odd years into a 5-year loan. When I sold the car, I still had the loan to pay, but not the car.
Yeah.
So that was bad. But yeah, the 350Z. I've had a lot of cars since. I think we own 7 now. And yeah, but the 350Z was a nice car.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. That's lovely.
Yeah.
So you paid off the debt, but at the same point, knowing what skills you needed to build up for the long term in everything you were doing.
Well, if anyone's listening and they want to know how to pay off your debt the quickest or make money the most, there's one word: sales.
Yeah.
And everyone's trying to avoid sales. Because they don't want to encroach on people, or they're scared of rejection, or in England they think it's a dirty industry.
Yeah, completely.
I mean, in America, it's like you're proud to sell.
Yeah.
So get into sales. I mean, I know that's how you turn things around, and that's how you went to 200 grand because you sold stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, you were doing it online. So I learned sales. Now I was a good artist, but I was terrible at selling my art.
Right. Okay.
A very good artist. Like most people don't know this, I was the only person in the UK in my GCSE year to get 100% in art. I mean, how do you get 100% in art? Because it's the most subjective thing ever.
Exactly
isn't it?
Right, yeah.
But I got 100%, and I was told, and they made some award at school based on that. I won an end of year award in school. But in the real world in art, you have to be good at selling it, the art or the story. There are many brilliant technical artists who are broke.
No, you're right. Yeah, you're right. It's interesting though, isn't it? I funnily enough, so when I got started, I was selling through Amazon, so just driving traffic, to be honest with you. But exactly that, I knew within about 6 months when my audience was building up, and I thought I need these multiple income streams. So I reached out to a guy that was selling a high ticket course, and I said, let me sell your high ticket course for the same thing. So I knew I needed those people's skills. And again, going back, so you grew up imparting
a pub industry, didn't you? So you would have learned the gift of the gab through osmosis, essentially, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I'd never really thought about this, but I used to hustle on the pool table. And I would have been, 9 years old, can barely reach over the pool table, and I used to beat all the customers. And my dad, to keep me out of trouble, got this guy called Harry Osborne, who was he was a good fighter. And so if Dad had any trouble in the pub, he'd get Harry to go outside and knock him out. But he became sort of like, in a way, my sort of protector godfather, and he taught me how to play pool.
Ah, lovely.
And he taught me how to hustle.
Right.
I.e., play pool really badly at first,
Yeah,
and
get
then
the
have
money
a
down.
bet. This 9-year-old kid, and so I hustled on the pool table, age 9 or 10. I don't know. Matt, did that help with me being an entrepreneur? Maybe. I'd never really thought about it, but yeah, I mean, growing up in a pub and being 9 and 10 and talking to adults, playing darts with them, playing pool with them, probably did help a bit.
Yeah. But you tell me, when you were learning public speaking, how much did you find either came naturally to you, or you thought, you know what, I do need that. I do know that. I just need to tweak this a little bit.
Honestly, I don't know. Here's what I'll say. And most people won't connect these dots, but my dad, strong northern man, who anyone messed with him, he'd just knock them out. No questions asked, always punch first. Or headbutt first. He liked to headbutt people. This was like 30 years ago. And because my dad was so strong and aggressive and at times really angry, by the way, never abused me. I'm, brilliant dad.
Yeah.
But I was scared of him.
Yeah.
So he would go mad at times. And my sister and I, my mum, we would all be like trying to placate dad and look after everyone, calm everything down. And I realized that I developed people-pleasing, conflict-avoiding coping mechanisms as a child growing up to handle my dad's anger. And what that manifested in my adult life was, on the one hand, I really didn't like conflict, really didn't like rejection, really held me back. Wouldn't ever ask anyone out on a date in case she rejected me. That's probably why I didn't have my own business, because I was scared of selling. But on the other hand, I could diffuse any situation. Like, if 4 terrorists came in here now with knives, I think I could diffuse it with what I say.
Yeah.
Because I've learned that through avoiding my dad like this. It'll be all right. Dad, calm down, Dad. Yeah, you'll be all right.
Yeah.
So, weirdly, this conflict avoiding, people pleasing, in some ways developed really good rapport skills with me.
Yeah.
But in other ways, it really stopped me putting myself out there and facing rejection, which you have to in sales and business.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a paradox. So when I started to learn public speaking, I was naturally really nervous of the rejection of public speaking. But I was also pretty good because I'd learned rapport skills. So I had to get over the fear.
Yeah.
But what I didn't know are the public speaking skills. Just like before you started e-commerce, you didn't know the e-commerce skills. So you have to learn the skills.
Yeah.
So I wasn't naturally great at public speaking. I was naturally a good conflict avoider, which probably helped me with some charm and rapport. But I was shit scared.
This is fascinating, I relate to that so much. I was the youngest of 3 boys, so I had 2 older brothers. I had to shout to get a word in. Same thing, my dad had a short temper, worked 80 hours, postman, worked nights. Anyone pissed him off. Before so many fights in fast food places I can remember as a kid. And it was the same thing. I've literally, as I was going through what I've been going through with this challenge, at one point I was going to the therapy saying, I'm too scared of rejection in order to grow, because I know I need to be fake. I know I need to be rejected to get better.
Yeah.
So it was something I actually had to work on, and exactly that. I've always been the guy. I was a policeman for 8 years. I never used my spray. I never used my baton. I was the guy they would send in to talk people down. And it's the same thing.
Yeah.
I didn't properly date until I was in my 20s for the same reason. It's amazing, Rob. It's amazing. But I think where I'm taking
By the way,
comfort
just
in this-
one thing we're not the same at is I did date in my 20s.
Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah, that people-pleasing, conflict-avoiding did get me into some knickers occasionally. I'm just fucking telling you that.
Yeah, no, I bottled it.
Yeah.
I was good at football though. That was
Yeah.
that was my distraction.
Yeah.
But
But this is a serious thing, because if anyone is listening and wants to start a business, you have to get over this conflict avoidance, and
Yes.
you have to move forward into suppliers reject you, customers reject you, you get returns, you try and sell something and they don't want it, you piss people off. I've got a mentor and he said, Rob, if you have the choice between pissing someone else off or pissing yourself off, choose them every time. And conflict avoiding people pleasers piss themselves off all the time to avoid pissing others off. So I actually had to learn how to piss people off and face the consequences of that. Because actually, if I say something and I believe it to be true and you get pissed off, that's not on me.
that's my problem. Yeah.
That's you, for you to deal with.
Yeah.
But I would always try and avoid pissing people off. But the problem is you can't avoid pissing people off because they get pissed off anyway. So you're moving around avoiding everything and it happens anyway.
Yeah. It's funny, when I first started going out on social media, the first question my wife would always ask, has anyone said anything negative yet? And I quickly came to realise I don't give a shit if they do anymore.
Yeah.
But it took some work. It did take some work. Interesting. Yeah, really interesting. I love it. So then we've got a trained public speaker now that's already got that charm and sort of dynamic charisma. You've now learnt sales, so you've learnt how to make money. That's pretty much ticking all of the boxes you would need, I guess.
Well, I think to start a business, you probably need something that's driving you.
Yeah.
So for me, it was pain and shame. And actually, that's a pretty strong motivator. Or you need to be broke. There's nothing like being broke to go out and get rich.
Yeah.
Very motivating. You know, I like my sales guys to spend all their money every month, so they come back the next month. You know,
Yeah.
oh shit. One guy just walked past the stairs. We've got over 100 staff here, and one guy walked past me on the stairs. He said, Rob, I'm so happy today. It's Friday. It's payday. I've spent it already. And I'm kind of thinking, that's good. Yeah.
See you Monday.
Yeah. So number one is you need something that drives you.
Yeah.
Because actually a lot of people, they want it, but they don't want it bad enough, or they're too comfortable to, you know, you probably didn't start because you had probably quite a good career. And,
Absolutely right,
you know,
yeah.
you're probably earning enough and things aren't bad enough. So you need
That's
some kind of focus or drive, number one. Then number two is you need to know what model, what vehicle, you know, what business are you going to start? What's the thing that you're going to make money out of? Because one of the downsides of multiple streams of income is you just get really overwhelmed and you don't really know where to start and where to focus.
Yeah.
So the second thing you need is the right vehicle or model. And then, the third thing you need to do is probably sales and marketing, or marketing and sales, which is generating leads and converting leads into cash and putting money in the bank. You don't need anything more than that. You don't need a massive IQ. You don't need you can be dyslexic as fuck.
Yeah.
You can be autistic as fuck. Actually, sometimes that really helps.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Really helps sometimes. I have certain real ADHD qualities for sure. You cannot have the confidence yet. Every winner was once a beginner. Every master was once a disaster. But they're the three things you need.
Yeah. No, completely agree. But then there's also an overriding resilience, isn't there? So you need that.
Well, there is, but you don't need it to start.
No. I think you're
You
right.
build resilience. You get resilient the more challenge you experience.
Yeah.
So I don't ever
and
want...
the more opportunity that you see as well, because without knowing what opportunity there is, it's easy to go, balls to that, I'll go back to my safe lane.
Yeah, maybe. I think in some ways people overcomplicate the start.
Yeah.
You've just got to start. And so therefore, if we say, look, you need a lot of resilience and grit to start, well, you're going to say, well, then I'll wait until I've got resilience to start. How do you build resilience? By starting and by hitting roadblocks and challenges. I wrote a book called Start Now, Get Perfect Later. And unless if you're a doctor, you don't want to start now, get perfect later. Just give me the fucking knife, let's have a go. If you're a pilot, you don't want to start now, get perfect later.
Yeah.
You have to do 7-10 years to even just be an assistant.
Yeah.
Being a doctor or a pilot. But an e-commerce business, an information business, podcast, YouTube, social media, content agency,
Yeah.
it's the opposite. You can be imperfect and start now. Because, for example, let's say you want to teach people property and you're like, well, I've only got 3 properties. So your brand should be how to get 3 properties in 3 months, or how to get 3 properties in the next 6 months.
Yeah.
And just teach people to do what you've done, because you only have to be further ahead.
That's it. That's my brand. That's essentially what I'm doing. I don't claim to be an expert in anything, but I'm the guy that's walked 5 steps ahead. That's it.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you how to get a few extra £100 a month.
Yeah.
And then once we get to that crossroads, I'm building a network where I can point you into the direction of people that can teach you the next bit.
Yeah.
And it seems to be working. I say enough that I've quit my job and we're going full time.
Yeah.
But I think an awful lot of it was leveraging this communication style. I've always been the public speaker guy. I've not actually learned it, but every job I've had has had an element of it, or especially the police was always a good one. So I used to work in financial crime. So I kind of did that on purpose so I could take quite complex, horrible bits of legislation and make them simple enough for a jury, you know. And that was the basis of everything that I did. So the Amazon selling was one thing, but it was the community building. It was this podcast. It was the public speaking. So at what point did you know that's a key driver for you? So you went big into public speaking and podcasting quite early on, I guess.
So my podcast Disruptors is in its 9th year.
Wow.
So 2016, I started it. Public speaking, I started in 2006. I worked out really quickly that speakers make a lot of money. And it is great leverage because it is one to many, not one to one. Yeah. Now, bearing in mind, when I started public speaking, there was no Facebook. YouTube was so new, no one got it. Everyone now knows, you know, doing videos on TikTok or Instagram can reach millions. No one really knew back then the power of social media and the internet. It was just starting. But I knew, because actually my boss came up to me and said, oh, we've got this opportunity to sell our deals from the stage. There's an event with 250 people on it. Who's going to be the speaker? And my business partner and my ex-boss both looked at me. And I was like, I'm going to be the speaker then. So I grabbed the opportunity. But, you know, being able to speak to 250 people instead of 250 individual 30-minute consultation calls or qualification calls is obviously brilliant leverage.
Yeah.
So I figured that out within 6 months of, I wasn't even an entrepreneur. I wasn't even my own boss. I had a job then for this property sourcing business. So yeah, I figured that out quick. Now, what other industry can you fail in your career and make tens of thousands an hour as a speaker? Only speaking. Yeah. Because look at all these failed politicians who make 50 grand, 100 grand a speech. Yeah. My friend Gerald Ratner, he won't mind me saying it, but you know, he made a bad joke. He was the biggest jeweler retailer in Europe. He made not really a bad joke. The media went for him. He went bust, lost everything, and now he makes money talking about what happened as a speaker, as a professional speaker. So you can be shit in your career and speak about it and make a lot of money out of it.
Yeah.
Or you can be a failed politician.
Yeah.
And make a lot of money out of it.
Yeah. I saw Kwasi Kwarteng on the TV today. Like, how are you getting gigs as a speaker? How? The guy was a laughing joke 2 years ago. I started the day after that budget because that was the straw that broke the camel's back for me.
Yeah.
And the guy is making a fortune, and he couldn't be a bigger failure on the world stage. Liz Truss is still doing public speaking events in the States.
Yeah, she lasted. Well, actually, to be fair to Liz Truss, I quite liked some of her policies. I just think that the financial institutions thought she was bad for the markets and got rid of her. But anyway, another story.
That's a different conversation.
Your show. Your show.
So talk us through, once you've got your public speaking down and you know what you're doing and you realise there is leverage in everything that I'm doing, when did you decide I need to get my branding in? When I need to start launching my personal brand when I'm on stage?
I think probably when Facebook started to become a thing. Yeah. That was when personal branding... Yeah, so what 2012, 2013. I mean, I'm never the first, but I'm always at the front. But actually, that's probably quite good. If you're the first, you're the guy that gets shot. So you never want to be the first. And at times, I'm like, damn, I was a bit slow on TikTok. You know, I had friends of mine who were in TikTok just 9 months before me, like Simon Squibb, and he's blown up 4 million on TikTok now.
Yeah, right.
That 9 months early makes a big difference when you compound it up. So I always like to be early, and I remember the Facebook groups got really big. When you could have 10,000 people in a Facebook group, but the engagement would be wild. You'd have 70 or 80% of that engagement. Now, before that was Google AdWords and email marketing, and they were relatively faceless.
Yeah.
But on Facebook, when it's your own profile and you've got all your information there and your own picture and you're doing lives and videos, all of a sudden your face is out there. So I would probably say 2012, Facebook was like, oh, okay, this personal brand is a thing. Now, I mean, personal brands are bigger than quite a lot of corporations, or at least they have a bigger following than corporations. And the great thing is it's the democratization and the decentralization of media. 20 years ago, if you want to start a business and do advertising, you had to do radio or TV or print. And you would have to pay thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions, and there would be no guarantee.
No.
You could get one lead. Oh, sorry, that's the deal. And then Google AdWords came along and decentralized it because you could pay, back then you could pay a pence a click.
Really?
Or 10 pence a click. And that decentralized everything. And maybe that was the initial birth of the personal brand. And now you can be a 15-year-old kid. There's a guy, Daniel Bitton, 17-year-old kid. And apparently he's making 100 grand a month from his content on YouTube and faceless YouTube channels. You know, either made up by AI or having various like motivational channels.
Yeah, yeah.
You can be a kid, not put your face out there, use AI,
Yeah.
and you can make 100 grand a month.
Easy.
Yeah.
Easy. My kids are fascinated by roller coaster videos. There's no one there. It's just
Yeah.
just on the front of a roller coaster.
Right.
So there's someone somewhere traveling the world doing roller coasters, making an absolute
Yeah.
mint off the back of it.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I started in 2022, and I knew I needed my brand before I pressed record for the first time. It's become that important. I had to write down what my brand values were, who I'm showing up as. I swear very rarely on there because I'm a family man. Hard work, traditional methods, like I said. And it was essential. But there's loads of people now that will just press record without doing that. That's the thing that I need to really emphasize, and it's one of the things that I bang on about, is do the work before you get going, because side hustle world is leading to lazy business practices. And I think if you treat a secondary income as an actual secondary business, not necessarily just a couple of £100 down the corner, you can really, really make a difference. But if you don't do that, that's why people say, why isn't my channel growing or anything like that? It's because I think you need to get your branding down before you show up so you know who it is you're talking to.
Okay, let me challenge you on that.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's a chap who has a show called Entrepreneurs in Cars. And now he mostly talks about being an alpha male and about guys not getting married and not being cucked and simped. Because he looked on his analytics and he found that that's what people wanted to watch. So he's evolved his channel. And if you look at what Facebook was essentially an internal intranet at Harvard University. It was just inside the university of the way for university students to connect.
Yeah, yeah.
A post-it note was failed glue. Penicillin was a Petri dish kept not cleaned, accidentally.
Yeah, yeah.
And so what if you don't know yet? What, you're going to wait until you know? And how will you ever know unless you start going out to a market and having conversations?
It's a fair point. It's a fair point.
So remember I wrote the book Start Now, Get
Yeah,
Perfect
I do.
Later. So let me ask you this. Is it better to have a business plan and do your brand values and do your ideal client profiles and your target market and get your branding and your visuals and your message and then start some live videos or TikToks? Or is it better just to start doing TikToks with the idea you've got today and do them every day until you've got your plan and your values and your ideal client profile?
Yeah. Both, potentially. Why not both? You could argue, so the guy that did the entrepreneur in cars, he worked along and then he read the data and then he evolved and pivoted and adapted.
Yeah.
Great. But I can't argue with the other examples. The penicillin is a great example. There's a book called by Matthew Said called Black Box Thinking.
Yeah.
And it's predicated on that exact thing. Pilots who crash a plane, they get the black box out, they learn the data, and then the plane won't crash that way again. That's the thesis behind it. Hospitals don't have that implementation in place, so they're not learning from their mistakes in certain ways. One of the best stories, one of the best case studies was the two guys at college that wanted to build cloud storage and never done anything. No, not even cloud storage at the time. It was like external hard drives. One guy, exactly that, procrastinated, thought, didn't launch. The first guy did launch. It was shit. Tweaked. That was Dropbox.
All right, there's part one. I told you, powerhouse, isn't he? Powerhouse. For those that are listening, you won't see this, but you can imagine the animation that Rob portrays. I know I do it, right, when I talk, because this is a performance. Public speaking is a performance, regardless. I don't care who you are. If you're putting yourself on camera and you're not moving your hands around, you're not doing it right, because you don't just talk with your mouth. Hello, my name's Des Hamilton. Yes, I turned 200 pounds. No, you put animation in. You make your face animated. You gesture with your arms. You look in different directions. You put on your performance. Rob put on his performance. What was fascinating to see as I sat over the jump from him is the shift in his eyes, the shift in his gaze when he switched on performance. And what I wanted the most was to get him to switch that off without noting it. Yes, and I got there a couple of times. Especially when we talked about family. You notice when he talked about his dad, he got softer. I do. We all do. Because it's important to us. When we start talking about the things that drives him, what did he do in his first year? For him to reflect, look back on that, I would imagine, and I don't know because I haven't forensically detailed this, but I was asking the sorts of questions that he's not had to answer for a little while. And it was lovely. Really, really lovely. Really, really liked him. So when he sat back and he said, you know what, 50 odd grand in debt, however much that was in today's money. But what he did do is that he found his business model. But when he found his business model and found what worked, he knew what motivated him. It wasn't the retainer, it was the commission. So he knew what he needed to do for his commission. But then he also knew the power in public speaking. That bulletproof notion of a public speaker is fascinating to me. On a side note, I run down Kwasi Kwarteng. Did you notice when about 2 weeks later he got Kwasi Kwarteng on his show? He would have been booked at that point. Whoops. Anyway, but what he did do was highlight just how bulletproof you can be if you're a public speaker. And I swear to God, that is something that I will die on a hill for. I utterly, utterly agree with him. It will stand you out. So watch out, because I'm coming on that public speaking circuit and I'm going to be doing the rounds more and more and more. Let's get on to next week's episode where we're going to continue with Rob and we're going to continue on the themes that we were going through, namely what challenges he was going through as he was building his business. But what's clear is that Rob knew his mind. Rob knew his plan. And we talk about a business plan and we talk about taking action over a business plan. I'm sorry. And yes, he challenged me. And yes, I said to him, you know what, you're right in instance X, Y, Z. But you look at his model. He clearly planned before he took action. Clearly planned. He didn't just say, I'm going to work for a property place. He worked for a property place with a specific goal in mind. And then he set up plan B while in his first year. That's not a whim. That's a plan. So you take action, targeted action, but do not procrastinate. I agree with him on that. Fascinating, right? I'd love another opportunity to have a chat with him, and maybe, who knows, maybe I will one day. But we certainly will next week anyway, because we're rolling on. So have yourself a lovely week. Remember, YouTube on Tuesday, podcast on Thursday, and everything else that I do. Go on. Oh, and while you're there, thank you once again to Celeramp SAS, our lovely sponsors. Have a lovely week. Catch you on the other side. Ta-da.
You've been listening to the 200 to £100,000 Challenge podcast. Make sure you join us next time for more real talk and some undoubtedly terrible jokes as Des gets ever more closer to saying goodbye poor, hello rich.